A couple days ago, Senator Marco Rubio published an op-ed on Medium saying Americans should expect election chaos, and he is absolutely correct. This November, we aren't going to have an election night, and everybody's already acknowledged it. If you follow my content, you've probably heard me talk about it quite a bit, because mail-in ballots will be coming in after election night. They'll still have to count them. But we've also seen several jurisdictions with voter fraud. Several people have been indicted on voter fraud charges, and we are going to see massive amounts of votes be disqualified, like we saw in New York with 84,000 disqualified votes, or Paterson, New Jersey, where around 20% or so of mail-in ballots are just voided, and people are starting to complain because they're being disenfranchised. Well, we now have more stories coming out showing this is going to get crazier. Group sends hundreds of thousands of potentially misleading ballot applications. The mailings contain legitimate ballot applications, but appear to be from a government source. And lo and behold, it's a left-wing group sending out what appears to be weird, bogus voter applications or ballot applications. Why is this happening? Look, I gotta say it, man. It would appear that the Democrats are doing this on purpose. It's a part of their strategy to completely upend and disrupt the election. I wonder if the Democrats expect to lose, and because of this, they are just trying to push forward some kind of election system that they know can't work, so at least they'll be able to dispute it and claim Donald Trump didn't really win. Now, I know some people are going to say, Tim, Joe Biden's leading in the double digits. Why should they expect to lose? Well, let me just point out, there was a study from University of Illinois, I believe it was Champaign-Urbana, that found the Beltway Politico bubble, journalists following each other, is worse than it was in 2016. The polls could be wrong. There's a lot of reasons to suggest Trump could win. In fact, more than half of voters expect Trump to win. I wonder if Democrats are expecting Trump to win, and their strategy is not actually to win. That's why they've chosen Joe Biden. Their strategy is try to delegitimize the president's victory. Let me simplify this. We know for a fact from all of these different articles that mail-in ballots are facing serious problems. Left-wing organizations are now sending out confusing and misleading applications. Democrats continue to insist we must carry on with this. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is saying we shouldn't be doing mail-in voting. It's going to be inaccurate and fraudulent. So you've got the Republicans who are saying, hey, we can't do this, pointing out the problems of this. Meanwhile, Democrats are encouraging it more. No matter how many problems pile up, they deny any of this exists, and so do their allies in media. But that brings me to Joe Biden. I'm looking at all of this, and I'm like, Joe Biden's not a viable candidate. Nobody thinks he is. Joe Rogan recently called the guy mentally compromised, making voters uncomfortable. And Joe's completely right. Marco Rubio shouldn't need to be telling Americans expect election chaos. Marco Rubio should be saying we need to push back on this narrative being put forward by Democrats that's resulting in this. Let me put it again. Listen, if Republicans are saying chill out on the mail-in voting because it's broken and Democrats are pushing for it, well, it's Democrats doing this on purpose. But it brings me back once again to Joe Biden, who is hiding in the basement. That's interesting. They got a candidate who isn't speaking, and when he does, it's ridiculous gaffes, it's racism, but he's hiding. And now media mentions of Biden are dropping out. It seems like they're not actually setting up to win. I did a video segment a little while ago talking about Biden not even actually campaigning. Have you noticed this? They're not going door to door. They're not doing a whole lot at all to try and help Biden win. In fact, they are hiding the man. Meanwhile, advocating for a broken system. Why? Well, the only thing I can say is, like I said, I think their goal is to just try and delegitimize the election altogether. But we'll see how that plays out. Let's actually read what Marco Rubio has to say. And I got to show you this. These weird mail-in ballots that are coming out, it reeks of voter fraud. Now, I didn't want to go as far as to say that the voter fraud has already begun, but this looks fishy. And it looks like people are already starting to play dirty games. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are many ways you can give, but the best thing you can do, look just below this little video and there's a button that says subscribe, and give that button a good tap. Boom. Now you're subscribed to the channel, and you'll be more likely to receive content from me on YouTube every day at 4 p.m. If you really like my videos, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and share this so that more people can, so you can help share the word, spread the word of the videos. I want to show you first what Marco Rubio has to say, because his warning is very important. Election night is going to be chaotic, and we're not going to know who won. And I fear that this will lead to more street violence, which we have already seen. And I also want to point out, activists are already planning for election night chaos. They are preparing for what they call a siege on the White House for 50 days. But let's read this story, and we'll get to that in a second. Marco writes, 4 years ago, the United States government failed to respond forcefully to Russian attempts to sow discord in and influence our elections. The previous administration's paralysis left Americans blindsided by Russia's meddling. I got to agree with him there. This happened on Obama's watch. Let's be clear, Marco says. Moscow's overriding goal was and remains to undermine our democracy and cast doubt on the legitimacy of our elections and drive deep societal divisions in America. Unfortunately, they appear to have been successful, as far too many Americans still question the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Yes, Marco, but please, can you point out it is mostly the Democrats pushing that narrative? As we look forward to November for this year, various adversaries are now seeking to sow discord, and we must be better prepared to defend ourselves. We know with certainty that Russia, China, and other nations are actively exploiting our domestic political divisions and looking for opportunities to undermine confidence in our elections. Given our nation's current challenges, a perfect storm of a global pandemic, lockdowns, subsequent economic turmoil, and social unrest, these efforts could be like throwing a match on an oil slick, but it gets worse. Local election officials in critical swing states like Pennsylvania, which saw a 17-fold increase in mail-in ballots for its June primary, are warning that absent changes, there is no way anybody can responsibly call the presidential race in November. We cannot escape the pandemic-induced reality of increased mail-in voting, and the logistical challenges associated with it will be difficult for some states to resolve in the next couple of months. No, I'm sorry, they won't be able to. Marco goes on. This will almost certainly lead to confusion, uncertainty, and perhaps chaos on election night. In fact, we'd be wise to expect it. Imagine election night results showing one candidate on top in a critical swing state, but the lead is fewer than 100,000 votes. And the state has 1 million mail-in ballots yet to be counted. Now imagine that potentially occurring across the country. After all, in 15 states, officials cannot even begin counting mail-in ballots until Election Day, a process that could take days or weeks. States may also be dealing with an influx of provisional ballots, which are frequently flashpoints in tightly contested elections. Americans would be on edge, even under the best of circumstances, but these are not the best of circumstances. Marco goes on to point out about interference from foreign elections, but I just want to mention, these few points from him. He says, there are a few steps we can take. We must clearly signal to foreign adversaries that meddling in our elections will be met with a commensurately harsh response. Sure, I get it. Second, we should give states the flexibility to provide local election officials additional time to count each and every vote by moving the federal safe harbor deadline for states from December 8th to January 1st. Now this I disagree with. He says, third, the federal government should continue to provide funding and expertise to states, especially those that do not have established or efficient mail-in ballot systems in place. Funding to support enhanced health and safety measures may also be necessary. Now, listen, I highlighted this post from Marco Rubio because I agree with him on the expectation of absolute chaos. But what he's pointing out with these 3 steps show us that by Democrats pushing for mail-in ballots above all else, we are now being set up to fail, and there is nothing we can do to change this. Marco is talking about a pipe dream. We cannot realistically implement these changes, get this funding, and make it work. Even if he thinks we can have steps we can take, we'd have nowhere near the amount of time to actually implement it. And he's talking about extending the deadline. You can't do it. It will be absolute chaos, and that's what we can expect. So I have to wonder why it is that Democrats continue to insist upon doing this. Marco is offering us a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It will not be sufficient. It won't. In fact, it'll only reward those who have sought to create this broken system. We're hearing now about these weird ballots being sent out from the Center for Voter Information. They say it's affiliated with a nonprofit called the Voter Participation Center that seeks to empower eligible voters with a focus on unmarried women, people of color, and young voters. But the organizations have repeatedly sent voters incorrect information. This week, hundreds of thousands of voters in Virginia had incorrect election office addresses on their prepaid return envelopes. What do you think that's going to do? These people are going to get these. They're going to fill them out. They're going to send them in, and they're going to go to the wrong place. Mail-in voting is broken. Stop advocating for it. I just don't get it, man. We're going to see the craziest election, in my life, for sure. Check this out. White House siege tactical briefing. Start September 17th. Adbusters, famous for calling for Occupy Wall Street. Maybe you didn't know this. They're the ones who said, go out and occupy. Are saying on the anniversary of Occupy Wall Street, go out. And for 50 days, they are saying they want you to lay siege to the White House and sustain. They want to lay siege to the White House and sustain it for 50 days. It is the hashtag White House siege. For 50 days from September 17th to November 3rd, they want mass groups around the White House. I don't know exactly what'll happen, but I think the Democrats are betting on Trump winning. That's what, I see all of this, and I think that's the only plan they have. They know they will lose. Their hope is that when they do, they will have something to use to claim Trump is illegitimate. I wonder about Russiagate, right? Why is it that we had years of this BUNK investigation against the president? In my opinion, it stopped Trump from firing many people. Now, it's not the only reason for sure, but I certainly think that a lot of people in the previous administration certainly wanted this Russia investigation. Certainly people in the intelligence agencies that served under Obama or were appointed, given their jobs under the Obama administration. They didn't want to lose their jobs, and Trump was going to fire a lot of people. All of a sudden, how convenient you get this Russiagate investigation based on all of these ridiculous false pretenses. And there's at least one thing it did. I can't go as far to say exactly what happened, but it is convenient, to say the least, that because of this investigation, it made it very difficult for Trump to actually start firing these people. It allowed them to jam up his presidency and, as some have suggested, actually sabotage the incoming administration. This is the whole narrative of Obamagate. When you see stories like this from NBC News, 1 in 5 mail-in ballots rejected in botched NYC primary. New York City expanded mail-in voting, but rejected 84,000 ballots in June. I highlight this, and I want to tie it to the previous story. The group, the voter registration group, what is it called? The Center for Voter Information, is focused on unmarried women, people of color, and young voters, and it's sending false information. It's a progressive group. So why would they send false information to this group of people? This is going to make it so that when Trump wins, they're going to say, look at the people who got disenfranchised. They'll be able to look at these 84,000 rejected ballots and say it was mostly first-time voters, people of color, marginalized communities, whose votes could have potentially changed the outcome of the election, but they were disenfranchised. They'll blame Republicans for it. And they will use that to delegitimize or sabotage Trump's second term. That's the desperation I see. Now the post office is broken. Look at this. U.S. Postal Service chief warns of dire finances, adopts manager hiring freeze. The head of the U.S. Postal Service on Friday said the agency faces a dire financial position, even as it posted a slightly narrow third quarter loss as package demand soared during the coronavirus pandemic. Because of the coronavirus, business itself is down across the board. And naturally, that means the Postal Service is going to be losing money. Look at this. U.S. Postal Service loses $2.2 billion in 3 months amid pandemic slowdown. But Postmaster General vows agency will be ready for election mail in November. Well, I think he's wrong. But I think about all the pieces in play. And what do we have? To be fair, I think we can say with absolute certainty that, yes, the Democrats are completely inept. And the reason I say that's what we can guarantee is you look at the narrative around Antifa, how they supported Antifa and the riots for quite some time. And once it backfired on them, now all of a sudden they're starting to back away. And we're seeing the media and many leftists say, oh, actually, Antifa is bad. That says to me, they're willing to embrace popular positions if only they know what they are. But I take a look at the lockdown, the costs, mail-in voting, and all the problems, and it looks like at any point they could say, we're not going to do that. It doesn't work, but they choose to. And you have all of these grains of sand now making a heap, which is, in my opinion, the Democrats know that the plans they're putting forward are broken, then they don't care. Again, perhaps because their strategy is to hide Joe Biden, who's not a viable candidate, who's been called mentally compromised by people like Joe Rogan. And I think everybody recognizes the dude isn't all there. Even the far left mocks him all day because they know he's not a legitimate candidate. So why would the Democrats choose Joe Biden, who is just an old, broken man? He doesn't have a VP. He's missing his deadlines. He can't debate. The DNC is being pushed back. Now Joe Biden's not going to be in Milwaukee. It's failure after failure after failure. Okay, fine. To be fair, I think I can say, first and foremost, the only thing we know for sure is the Democrats are failing every step of the way. But at a certain point, doesn't it feel like they want this? They have warmed to the strategy, as the media claimed, of hiding Joe Biden. So you've got Joe Biden out of the press. When he's in the press, he can't speak properly, and he says things that are overtly racist. You've got broken primaries, broken mail-in voting. The Democrats continue to advocate for this. I have to wonder. I do. Take a look at this story from Breitbart. Axios study. Conservative media's Joe Biden-related social media traffic in decline. Very interesting. And Axios calls this defanged. They say, Axios Newswhip 2020 attention tracker, right-wing media defanged. Social media interactions with Biden stories on right-wing media are going down. The three biggest anti-Joe Biden storylines in right-wing media over the last year have either fizzled or are getting less online traction than they used to. This dynamic has rendered a formidable media ecosystem less effective in boosting President Trump as we move into the heart of the 2020 campaign. The data shows that for articles published about Biden since last fall by Fox News, Breitbart, Daily Wire, Daily Caller, and Western Journal, articles about Biden's mental acuity, Hunter Biden and Burisma, and Tara Reade's accusations have generated the most interactions, but in recent months, the interest has dissipated. Engagement on pieces about Biden's mental sharpness peaked in March, and then even higher in June, but has decreased since then. Chatter about Hunter Biden serving on the board of the Ukrainian gas company Burisma has been declining. Interactions about Tara Reade's allegations also in decline. They say, unlike other storylines that right-wing publishers have feasted on in the past, where new morsels of information reinvigorated news cycles, there have been no new revelations in the Burisma story. Yada, yada, we get the point. They say the bottom line, the trend underscores Trump's struggle to effectively attack Biden and give him ammunition to turn the focus on his opponent rather than his response to the pandemic. They are hiding Joe Biden so you cannot see him, and it is working. The media has nothing to talk about, so they don't have a candidate. Perhaps the reason they haven't chosen a VP is to prevent the news from latching onto any of this. They don't want anyone to have an opportunity to smear Joe Biden the way Hillary Clinton got smeared in the last election. And that's why many people think Joe Biden may actually be swapped out. And that's why he hasn't chosen a VP. The Democrats' entire strategy is chaos and uncertainty. Now, look, maybe it's a bit reaching to claim they want the election night chaos with mail-in voting. But based on what we've seen with Ukrainegate, impeachment, and scandal after scandal, and a failure to actually legislate, that sounds like, to me, this makes the most sense. It's the simple solution. Over at Politico, they say, the media's biggest favor to Joe Biden was to ignore him. Having already pummeled him decades ago, reporters elected to chase fresher targets. Will they wake up when he's actually in the White House? No, of course they won't, because we've seen the trends under Barack Obama. My prediction, if Joe Biden wins, which I really don't think so at this point, the news would fizzle out. And so would the far left, because they'd be marginalized and nobody wants to talk about it. The Democrats tried to weaponize the far left to their advantage. Black Lives Matter did see a lot of support following, the George Floyd incident. But because of the riots, things have backed down. And now Democrats are starting to back away from this narrative, though they are still reticent to call out the far left for what it is. Joe Biden will be trampled all over. He is a puppet candidate. He's not a real candidate. He's not actually running, which is why I feel like they've been planning to lose for quite some time. I said this during the primary that I didn't think Joe Biden was actually running for office. I thought it was just a gag. He wasn't doing events. I mean, he wasn't speaking properly. He was losing in the primary. He wasn't spending that much money. He wasn't fundraising any money. So I'm like, this guy's clearly not running. I question why it is they wanted him to be the nominee. Some people are predicting now that the Democrats actually won't choose him at the DNC. There will be a revolt. In fact, already progressives are slamming the DNC for refusing to adopt more progressive healthcare proposals as part of their manifesto. So they think come the end of the month, it won't be Joe Biden. That's another reason why Joe Biden isn't actually going to be there. Everybody is predicting some swap out. Who's it going to be? Hillary Clinton rematch Donald Trump? Maybe that's why they want the uncertainty. Hillary Clinton's going to come in and get her turn finally. But think about it. Joe Biden hasn't announced a VP. He's going to be 2 months backed up, I believe, or about a month behind from when the DNC was supposed to take place and the VP was supposed to be announced. There's no debates. Votes are already being cast and no debates have been had between the two presidential contenders. Maybe it's because it will not be Joe Biden, and chaos and uncertainty is what the Democrats are hoping for. Joe Biden announced he won't be going to Milwaukee and he'll accept the nomination virtually, unless, of course, he's not going to be getting the nomination. And he doesn't have a VP yet because he won't be choosing a VP. At the very least, what it sounds like is that whether or not they swap out Joe Biden, he's not going to be running. He's not. He's not debating. He's not campaigning. He's not doing anything. So what we get in the end on election night is Donald Trump, and that's it. So why? Did the Democrats think they were going to lose and just need a cudgel for the next 4 years to claim Trump is corrupt and he's not the real president? Are they hoping for some kind of civil unrest or breakdown? This is another thing that was mentioned in, one of my previous segments about this war games the Democrats did, where John Podesta of the Hillary camp said the Democrats would not allow Joe Biden to concede if he loses, and they would actually advocate for the West Coast to secede from the United States. Are they just hoping for complete and utter chaos? And that's why they've been hiding Joe Biden. That's why the post office, they've been pushing for mail-in voting. The post office is unprepared. And that's why they're pushing broken, fake mail-in votes. I don't know, man. And I'll tell you what, though, the far left is planning their siege in the White House. So there's going to be street-level violence. The war games predicted that. And, it really feels like every day we're getting more grains of sand added to the heap, which makes it really hard to break down properly. Every day there's a new story talking about how mail-in voting is broken, the election is broken, and we're going to see more and more of this. Now the far left is planning 50 days of street action in front of the White House, and I think we're going to see it because I think the Democrats want it. I don't know, man. Is it unprecedented, or is it just me because I'm 34 and haven't seen that many elections? I know a lot of people have told me in the past. I've seen a lot of comments saying, Tim, it's just an election year, calm down. Is this normal? 50 days of far left out in front of the White House? I think they're trying to put Trump in a difficult position where for 50 days before the election, they will claim he's using military police. They'll call him a fascist. And then when it comes to the vote, no one will know exactly what happened or who won. I can't tell you, man. I'm just going to sit back here and do the same thing I do, I guess. It's a rough day, to put it simply, because the more I see of these stories about mail-in voting, the less I can actually give you a clear picture of what's going on. The post office says they're underfunded. The left is arguing that it's part of a Trump conspiracy to actually hinder the post office to break mail-in voting, and that it's Trump who wants mail-in voting chaos. But mail-in voting is already chaotic, and we've seen the story going back, a decade now or so, 8 years to the New York Times. What are we supposed to do about it? I can't give you the answers, but I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastNews. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.